Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake at Arts. With me today, our co-host Tom McGarry, also with Drake at Arts, author Judith Dickerman-Nelson, and ASL interpreter Elizabeth. Judith earned her BA in English from UMass Lowell and her MFA in writing from Emerson College. She is the author of a memoir, Believe in Me, a teen mom's story, and a poetry book, Spirits Dancing into Light. Her writing has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. She taught writing for years, worked at the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association in Lowell for 15 years, and Judith now works in the mental health field. She has 2 grown sons and lives in Vermont with her husband. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
You know, you have 2 very different stories and very different books. How did these come to be published at the same time?
Well, that was pretty interesting. One, the memoir, Believe in Me, a teen mom's story, I've been working on for, really years in different iterations. And then Hillary Holiday, who had Jefferson Park Press, came to me and talked about wanting to publish the book. I was looking at it. And at the same time, I had begun working with Paul Marion from Loom Press around the book of poems. So they were both in progress. And I think the fact of their coming out at the same time was just a surprise happenstance. Yeah.
But there's
and really 2 different genres, of course.
Very, very different genres and very different things you're putting forward. So how did you come to be a writer? I mean, you always did write, but because you were keeping your journals and as a teenager and things, but how did you get spurred into this art form?
Well, when I was little, I did used to write poetry and short stories, even in elementary school. And I remember when I was in junior high at one point, I wrote a lot of poems. I was on a little television show, and I wrote poems for the people who were in it, and really felt even then that I knew that I wanted to pursue writing in some avenue. So when I went to college, I continued on that path those many years later. I think I was always writing in some form or another.
So always journaling and writing poems and short stories. They're so different, poetry and stories.
They are, and I do write across different genres. I also really enjoy writing some children's literature. So yeah, there was a story about Cambodian New Year, actually, that was in highlights for children, and that was pretty exciting.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And and I'll do essays as well. So it's sort of, I kind of dabble in a lot of different genres, which is interesting, but at the same time it can be challenging to stay focused on, say, a project per se.
Is that because a certain genre speaks to something you have to say in particular?
That's really a great question. With the memoir, Believe in Me, at one point, I'd written some poems, and I also had written different short stories. So it took me a while to get to the voice of the book, telling my own story. I think at one point I tried to do a short story where I imagined myself in the shoes of being a young father, and that was really different. So, and with poems, I guess sometimes like an image or a line comes to me first, and sometimes with short stories it might be the full character. I guess I sometimes don't know when I start out where it's going.
So in a way, it's just like having a lot of different paints on your palette for you?
Yes, I would say that is a really great,
Yeah.
great.
Or even like a composer, they don't always write symphonies. Sometimes they write chamber pieces or solo works. That's kind of what you're doing. It's like you have something to say, but the idea comes and says, okay, I am in this form.
Yes, and I also think a piece of it is the discovery in the writing, that you can start out sometimes with an intent of what you think you're doing, but you are discovering while you're doing it. Are you is the meaning creating the form, or is, as you're creating it, whatever that it becomes, then making the form? And I really like what you're saying about the painting, because I think there's a parallel thing. Does the painter always know? I mean,
Right.
always know what they're going to get in the end. I think it can shift and change.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So I think both of your books are very important, but I would actually like to have you say what you think was so important about writing a teenage mom story.
Okay. Well, I also, when I was at the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association, one of my jobs was the education director, and I worked with teen moms.
Oh, wow.
It's called the Young Parent Program, that's run through like economic services and through different places. And I think I felt strongly aware that there are many young parents out there who maybe think they can't overcome the obstacles that brings about in a life. And I wanted to offer hope to other folks, but not just the teen parents, because it's been interesting how I'd hear that someone shared with me how their older father read the book and really enjoyed it. So I've heard of different groups where I also did go and speak with some teen parents too. So I think a large piece of it was exploring hope and purpose, and for me also too, the importance of having my baby when I was really young, and that was in 1980. So
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Went to a Catholic high school, so it was and they were very supportive. I was blessed, but tricky. It's tricky.
It's not an easy situation.
No, and but I think that it's important. I think it's really important for stories to be told, and then sometimes we see ourselves in other people's stories, whether it's as a young mom or maybe the young father's family or my family. Also, I'm adopted too. That was a piece of that's in the story a little bit. But I think it was also really important for me to get past some of my own angers around some of the things. I mean, to be really honest, I had to sit with a lot of those feelings while I was writing it, and come to a space where to be able to tell the story, I'm going to say, without being angry and judgmental about different scenarios. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, I really liked your book. It brought up a lot of things for me, and it's a very interesting, the way you looked. It's clearly a teenager's writing, but at this
voice is a teenager.
Yeah, and all the confusion and the feelings of a teenager. And I obviously read it recently. I have kids that are in their 20s, so they've been through that process. But I also remember when I was that age, and I clearly remember when they were that age because it wasn't that long ago. And just thinking of the choices that people make, you know, all along the way, and how you choose, and the process of choosing is also really important. It's not necessarily just the choices you make, you know, like the young man really wanted to stay with you and by you, and he wasn't allowed to make his own choices. But that's also a choice, right? He chose to follow. So that's a choice. We don't always see all the choices as choices, right? I remember one of my cousins got really mad at me once because her husband died young, and she was talking about how hard it was. I said, yeah, but what a powerful choice you have to keep going, that you're choosing to keep going. That's a really powerful choice. And she looked at me like I had 12 heads and ran away to the other side of the room. But I didn't mean it to disempower her. I meant it that you're choosing this, and just by your choice, you're standing up and doing that. You know, now some people, sometimes the choices they make, they're not standing up, right? There's a case you could make for the young father not really standing up for himself, but maybe that's also a choice. You know, it kind of gets funny that way, but it's true. And at some point in our lives, we need to go back and look at all those moments in time, and evaluate whether we would do the same thing now, whether we would do the same thing for different reasons or for the same reason. You know,
it's a good point. I know I found myself sometimes saying, you know, just in simple things, oh, I can't, right? As if I don't have choice. And I do think it's important sometimes to reframe things, or to remember that if I don't do something for whatever the reasons are, that indeed I am making some decision and choice. And yeah, and some are you know, smaller and some are bigger.
Right. Do I want peanut butter isn't a very big choice, but there are other ones that are.
I think if you go against your family or whatever your environment might be, takes a lot of confidence and willpower, and in fact, a lot of energy that you're investing over a long period of time to just do that. And so while the choice was sad, it's kind of understandable.
Sure. And I have, you know, I have men, you know, I raised boys. And so, you know, again, just also I do have, I guess I'll call it a bit of a gift. I feel as if I can see many sides of different scenarios with a compassionate, empathetic way. Like I really do try to understand where folks are coming from. And even hearing your story, Diane, you know, I get what you were saying, and I understand at the same time someone grieving so heavily that they may not be able to hear.
Sure, wasn't the most tactful time for me to say that.
Well, we don't, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be comforting, but it didn't come across to her that way at all, which I totally understand. But on the other side, you have these wonderful poems about a completely different experience.
Yes. The poems are just beautiful, but your book of poems, one section is about Cambodia and the killing fields. The other section is about Lowell, Massachusetts, and just the subject matter took an active will to just, you know, read this stuff. So each individual poem was just, you know, wonderful, but to actually engage with the horrible things that happened, and so many people being killed, that was hard. So did you have a hard time writing basically the whole book of poems, but especially the section about the killing in Cambodia?
It was very challenging. It was super emotional. You know, I would find myself crying as while writing some of them. I think one of the things that was also really difficult was, you know, writing about another's culture,
Yeah.
and whether or not, or how could I, how could I do that? Questioning myself around that even. And I don't know, and I do think that writers can voice others' experiences, and of course it's going to be through a lens of themselves.
Sure.
But I was very, very close with the community because I worked at the CMA for 15 years.
Yeah.
And the stories that people shared, say directly with me when I'm writing about someone's experience of, say, going to get food and dressing up as a girl because girls would get food first. That person knew I was writing that poem, and I would share things back with folks and make, I felt like I really needed to know that it was okay. And also it was really important to me to have the poems side by side in English and Khmer.
Yeah, that's really cool. I wish I could read Khmer, but of course I can't.
No, but it's beautiful to just see it written. It's such a gorgeous looking language.
It's very pretty, and I truly appreciated Borath, Chan Bryan doing that. It was quite a labor for him to do that and to talk back and forth about that process.
Yeah.
So it was challenging. It certainly was super challenging, a very, very tragic, sad subject. But again, some of the stories in the poems, I just felt like they had to be said.
Yeah.
But they were calling to me to say them too.
There was one image that particularly struck me. It's about the immigration services, and there's a man, Cambodian, now in this country, and he had lost his hands in the fight. But immigration services insists that he come in person to have his fingerprints taken. And somehow that just really struck me as incredibly sad and at the same time incredibly absurd. So,
It's a very short poem.
Yeah. But that image just really got me. So could you maybe say a little bit about, without violating anybody's privacy, but how did the person or the family come to tell you the story, or how did you meet the person involved?
That one was, people telling me about folks who had lost their hands. And then part of the piece about the path that then crosses over into my imagination is what is it then like?
Yeah.
It is super short. Would you be okay with my reading it?
Absolutely.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
I really enjoy that poem too. And also too, you'll hear sort of how would I read such a poem, right?
Yeah.
Called Immigration Bureau. He has no hands, you say, as you look at the man seated before you, his arms like flippers ending at elbows. But the agent on the phone doesn't seem to understand and insists that he will need to be fingerprinted like everyone else if he wants a green card. As if he could call digits back, ask them to part the grain in distant rice fields, ask them to search for his hands in murky waters, then find their way home.
Boy.
Yeah, and then the idea of home, I think, is a theme that comes up for me. Well, probably in both books, probably it's in a lot of my writing.
Yeah.
But for the book of poems, and that one in particular, in that really short poem, I think it also speaks to the idea of someone being, not the idea, the fact of someone being in another land, right? Where I'm sure they would prefer to be home,
Yeah.
And then also to the, Tom, to your question too, just about the experience of bureaucracy
Yeah.
and stuff doesn't fit.
Yeah. And this is part of the sadness is the trauma on top of this incredible trauma that just functioning in normal life is such a challenge. So it's doubly or triply sad.
Thank you for letting me read that too.
Oh, sure.
Appreciate that.
Is there another one you'd like to share with us today?
Oh, let's see. Well, let's do a little bit of a lighter one from Lowell, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah. This, and it is actually, it's called Tasting Home. So that's funny. I just thought about that one. And some of the poems also have some Khmer words in them. So this one does. It has prahak, which is a strong fish paste that they use in cooking. And then cacao snout, which is an edible yellow flower in Cambodia. So, tasting home. Outside the old brick mill, she picks blossoms from a maple tree and iridescent baby leaves that shine among the flowers. She takes them home and makes a dipping sauce, crushing garlic, chili peppers, lime juice, and prahak. She adds tilapia and remembers Cambodia, where she would use head snake fish and fresh tamarind. In her small apartment, a million miles from home, she tastes leaves like cough now and smiles, sipping fermented fish sauce from her lips.
Wow.
And I guess one of the things I love the resilience. I think some of them, despite the extreme sadness, also speak to a resilience and a strength, which I think is also a piece of it's a piece of the themes, I'd say, in both of the stories, in terms of needing to remain strong and in obviously very, very different ways that are not analogous.
They're not.
In the poems, I don't really hear your voice. Somehow you achieve the immediacy of like the horrible experience or the sadness of the man with no hands, or longing for the tastes of home in Lowell, the Mill City. So that must have been very deliberate on your part, was it?
Yes, and I think it has a flavor, pardon the pun there, but a flavor of persona in terms of when I was writing the pieces, the ones that were very much the person's experience, like that woman cooking in her apartment. It's like taking it on a bit. So I would say very much on purpose from a hopefully as I said earlier, a compassionate, empathetic place where I want to share their story, but it's through my own lens, of course, and my own interpretation. But thank you for that. That's really lovely of you to say.
You've been to Cambodia, yes?
Yes, I have. I went with a dear friend who is an ESOL teacher for Lowell Adult Education, and then another friend. So it's just the three of us, who she also works there. And it was quite an experience because his family was there. So we were going to small villages and eating with his family, in like a thatched roof hutch with his yay, which is grandma. And I have long red hair, and the children in some of the rural areas would follow, and my friend is also Caucasian, and they'd follow us because we were out in quite rural Cambodia and didn't exactly fit in. But it was amazing, and of course all of the traditional places you would go as well, Angkor Wat, Phnom Penh. But it was such a beautiful, beautiful country, amazing, lovely people, and it was an honor to be able to experience, their world, and of course to also go to the killing fields and the tragedies as well, which is hard.
That is hard, but it's all part of it. Yeah.
Yes, I don't think you could be there and not go there.
Yeah. Is it some people who've spoken about being at different concentration camps now feel like they're going to a holy spot and raising people up. Was there a similar feeling when you were at the killing fields?
I would say yes, you feel their spirit, the people who are there. Some of them, it's very difficult. Some of them, like the clothing coming there in the ground, or piles of things like that. I do think that holy and terrible, of course, at the same time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, and one of the poems that I write about Tuol Sleng, the school that was turned into a torture place where they killed folks and photographed them. So you see their photographs, and you also you oddly see your own reflection. Like if you really stop and you're looking, you can see your reflection in the glass, and that became the impetus of one of the poems. But you do feel the people who came through there, and so for that, of course, it does feel like holy ground.
Yeah. You're describing it to me seems to echo other people's thoughts of reverence and of lifting the people up, and of at the same time the heartbreak.
Yeah. And then the strength of those who survived and came and made lives here, and then bring family over and or go back and continue the perseverance and strength, and the courage is phenomenal.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about these two books and about your experiences. We look forward to more during the November Arts Saturday. And for more information, people can go to our website, drakeatarts.com. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please feel free to do that. You can find information on our website as well. And we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Cultural Improvement Portfolio Project, and also the Billerica Cultural Council and the Drake Cultural Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
It's an honor. It really is.